Because I run a job board, I talk to applicants almost every day. And many of the people I meet make the same mistake. They have no clear job search goals. So they apply everywhere, every day, all day long. You might think it's smart to send lots of applications. After all, it's a numbers game, right? It's not. The more you narrow your search, the easier everything gets, and the happier you'll be in your next job. Stop chasing every lead. Instead, focus on what you really want. Now, figuring out your goals can be hard, but we have a MaxList resource that can help. Finding focus in your job search. Go to maxlist.org/focus. Our free step-by-step MaxList guide will help you create your own job search goals. Get your copy today. Visit maxlist.org/focus. Again, that's maxlist.org/focus. This is Find Your Dream Job, the podcast that helps you get hired, have the career you want, and make a difference in life. I'm your host, Mac Pritchard. I'm also the founder of MaxList. It's a job board in the Pacific Northwest that helps you find a fulfilling career. Every Wednesday, I talk to a different expert about the tools you need to get the work you want. A job search can take several months or even longer, and as time passes, you may need a mid-course correction. Kristen McConnell is here to talk about when and how to revisit your job search goals. She's the Chief Operating Officer at Mulberry Talent Partners. It's a boutique recruiting agency that helps clients and candidates find the perfect match. Kristen joins us from Portland, Oregon. Well, let's jump right into it. Kristen, we're talking about when and how to revisit your job search goals. But let's start with the definition. When you talk about job search goals, what do you have in mind exactly?
Well, your goals are, it's such a unique circumstance for each job seeker, and depending on where they are at in their career, if they are early career, mid-career, or if they're just, looking for that great sunset opportunity. And so the goal piece is really something that everyone has to come to their own decision on, so to speak, and determine what makes most sense to them. And then once they get to that point, then you develop a plan for your job search, at which some point you have to step back and say, do I need to revisit this a little bit? Do I need to make a course correction, and what would that look like for me?
Let's talk a little more about goals. How specific do you recommend the candidates you work with be about this? Are we talking about being clear about the job title you want, or perhaps a list of target employers? Is it about making a career move, say a promotion, or maybe salary? What list do you recommend candidates consider when setting goals?
I mean, those are all top of the list, most certainly. What do you want to target? Is it for you? Is it about making that next step in your career? Are you maybe at a manager level looking to move into that director level space? Are you looking to take what you know and move into a different industry? Maybe you've been um, say in the nonprofit world for many years, and you've gained a tremendous amount of experience, but you want to make that transition into public sector or work for a private company. So defining some of those is really critical to help setting up your goals. Absolutely, compensation, and there's two parts of a compensation goal. There is a, what do I really need in terms of compensation, and what do I want to target in terms of compensation? And then we all know there's the other side of compensation beyond just what our salary is, but what other rewards are important to me in, from my employer. Is it am I driven by benefits? Am I more driven by a flexible schedule and time off? And really sitting down to, I say maybe 5 goals is really the best thing to target, because otherwise I think if your list becomes too terribly long, then you become overly focused in your job search, and it's not broad enough. And depending on the kind of market we are in, you could really find yourself becoming discouraged and somewhat pigeonholed if you have too long of a list.
So consider those attributes you just laid out, come up with your top five priority goals. What happens in your experience, Kristen? Because you work with a lot of candidates, you're at a recruiting agency. What happens to candidates who don't ask themselves those questions and arrive at answers and might just decide, well, I'll sit down at the computer and send out applications?
Well, we see this show up in two different ways. One is it's oftentimes a passive job seeker who just wants to test and see what's out there. And that's a challenging way to approach a job search. If you don't have something in mind that you are going after, it can really feel overwhelming when you start a job search. And especially if you're not working with either a career coach or a professional mentor, a recruiter, even your own employer, if they are making changes and supporting you through a new job search. But having we see passive seekers probably struggle the most when they don't have a goal in mind and what they're targeting. The other area that we see this show up that really proves to be a challenge for someone is when someone finds themselves unexpectedly conducting a job search. Maybe they just got word today that their job is being eliminated, or a company is closing. Maybe it's a termination, and sometimes candidates will just immediately start reaching out to their network without intention or any clarity. And that can also feel really empty if you do it that way, because it's hard for the person on the other side of that to be able to support that individual in a way that is productive and makes sense. Because oftentimes we'll get an email that just says, "Hey, my position was eliminated today. Do you have anything to run by me?" And we're like, "Well, gosh, we don't even know anything about you. We don't know what's important to you. We don't know what you're looking for next." And so making sure that people just take a moment, even a day or two, when you find yourself in that unexpected job search, to jot down some of those goals. Like, what is next for me and what do I want to focus on?
Okay, so have a list. It doesn't have to be encyclopedic, but know your top five job search goals. And you did a great job of explaining what those goals to consider. So you've done this. You've been out there looking for work for some time. What are the signs that a candidate might pay attention to that indicate that maybe it's time to revisit your job search goals?
I think I kind of think about that in three different groups of job seekers. So we have, the emerging professionals that are maybe just getting started in their career, and they're really focused on a certain type of opportunity. Maybe they are a recent graduate and have a degree that they want to put to use, and they've had a good focus on that type of search. And if you're sitting there at 2 months and you've gotten very little response back or interaction from potential employers, my recommendation is step back and say, instead of the job that I'm after, what kind of company am I looking at? What kind of industries are a good fit for my experience and my interests? And where can I get started with that company? And be open to those more entry level roles within an organization, because we all know once we get into a role, if we are going to shine, we are going to shine, and we are going to make those advancements as quickly as makes sense for an organization. When you are, more advanced in your career, you should expect a search to take a little bit longer. But again, if nothing is happening after 3 or 4 months, then you certainly need to step back and reevaluate. A lot of times what we see is a candidate in this circumstance is potentially approaching their search the same way they did maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. And there can be such wild changes in the job market that you have to adjust your search and how you approach it. um, and even just thinking about what level do I need to go in at right now, what makes sense for me, what makes sense for what I can offer to an organization, what might get me to the long-term goal that I am after. And don't just rely on the same tactics that you've used in the past.
So there are three groups here. The first are emerging professionals, recent graduates. The second, it sounds like mid-career, perhaps. Who's in the third group, Kristen?
That is the passive job seeker. And those are the individuals that are maybe every now and then reaching out to a recruiter or applying for an opportunity here and there. In the back of their mind, they know they're ready to make a change, but they've been somewhat passive. But when you start to realize, gosh, I'm really just cruising on autopilot, I am not engaged. I could potentially be even underperforming because I'm not engaged. That is absolutely your sign to switch your focus into an active versus passive job search.
Okay, let's pause there. I want to take a break. Stay with us. When we come back, Kristen McConnell will continue to share her advice on when and how to revisit your job search goals. Do you plan where to go on vacation based on the local language? With Babbel, language no longer has to be a barrier. Babbel offers quick 10-minute lessons handcrafted by more than 200 language experts. By using Babbel for 10 minutes a day, you can begin speaking your new language in 3 weeks. And because conversing is the key to really understanding each other in new languages, Babbel uses practical, real-world conversations. I'm using Babbel to get ready for a trip to Italy in October, and Babbel is helping me learn the basic phrases I need to talk with locals and manage the tasks of daily life. Babbel has worked for millions of language learners of all ages. Find out for yourself. Babbel is gifting our listeners 60% off subscriptions at babbel.com/dreamjob. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/dreamjob. That's spelled BABBEL.com/dreamjob. Babbel.com/dreamjob. Rules and restrictions may apply. Have you ever been asked this in a job interview? Tell me about a time when you didn't agree with your boss. What would you say? This is what's called a behavioral interview question, and it's a common tactic. Employers use this kind of question to explore your fit for a job based on your past experience. It can be an easy question to answer if you have the right strategy. I show you how to answer these gotcha questions in our free Max List guide, 100 Behavioral Interview Questions You Need to Know. To get your copy, visit maxlist.org/questions. You'll also learn 4 simple steps for answering any behavioral interview question. Again, that's maxlist.org/questions. You can count on getting these questions in your next interview. Why not get the answers before you walk into the interview room? Go to maxlist.org/questions. We're back in the Max List studio. I'm talking with Kristen McConnell. She's the Chief Operating Officer at Mulberry Talent Partners. It's a boutique recruiting agency that helps clients and candidates find the perfect match. Kristen joins us from Portland, Oregon. Now, Kristen, before the break, we were talking about when and how to revisit your job search goals. And you talked in the first segment about the importance of having goals and the difference it can make in a search. And we talked about when you might see signs that it's time to revisit your goals. And you described 3 different groups of job seekers, both new emerging professionals, mid-careers, and professionals, and passive job seekers. One last question about whether or not you should revisit your goals. How can you be sure the issue is your goals? Maybe you need to update your resume or tweak your LinkedIn profile. Maybe these tactical things like that are reasons why you're not getting any traction in your search.
Yeah, I do. Having a revisit to your resume is always beneficial, and utilizing your professional network for that. Not overutilizing it, by any means, but if you have a mentor or a colleague even that just is willing to take a look and see what stands out to them. And a question that I would ask is, if you saw my resume today, what type of opportunity would you consider me for? and see what stands out as how are you presenting in terms of your skills and your experience, is showing up for other individuals. And the same thing on your LinkedIn is, having that present in a way that you want it to, that highlights your skills and experience, but then also dives into where does your path want to lead you.
So it's time, you think, for a mid course correction and you want to revisit your goals. Let's walk through the tips you recommend people follow to do this. One of your first suggestions is don't panic and reach out to others for help, just as you described a moment ago with you might do with your resume. What are other ways you might do this, Kristen?
Take a look at what was maybe once just off the table for you, not something you were willing to consider, and go back and take another look at that. I think one of the most common is considering some contract, interim, temporary opportunities. We have seen so many times candidates approach us and say, gosh, I've been in the market now for 3, 4 months. I'm just not making any headway. What are my options? And, 6 out of 10 times, if a candidate jumps into a contract role that is currently vacant, there's no better spot to be than the person sitting in that seat when the client is then ready to move forward with a full time hire. It just is a really great way to get yourself back out there. It builds your professional network and it reinstills your confidence and it keeps your skills fresh.
Another recommendation you have for revisiting your goals is to know your pressure points. What do you mean by pressure points, and how is this going to help you?
I think your pressure points, it's so different for everybody. Maybe you have a very long search runway. Maybe you're either still employed or you were exited with a really nice severance package that gives you room. Or maybe you're an individual that just has immediate financial and family obligations and you need to get back to work right away. So take a look at what is your pressure point? What do I need from a job? And then what do I want in a job? And maybe you're conducting two job searches kind of parallel to one another. Not every job will be your forever job, and it's okay to take a bridge opportunity and see where that takes you.
You mentioned finances as a pressure point. You might have a severance package. Maybe you didn't get one. Maybe there are bills that are looming. Are there other examples of pressure points you've seen candidates wrestle with?
Absolutely. I think the other one is some people just know that they are going to be mentally better off working than not working. Even if they maybe have a great severance package and, they have the opportunity to, be on unemployment and take time to conduct their search, they know at the end of the day, they are going to be better to themselves by simply working versus not working.
What about self assessment, Kristen? It's important, obviously, throughout life just to revisit what we're doing, but sometimes people might take that to extremes during a job search. How often do you recommend someone do a self assessment?
Well, I think when you get started with your search, have those target goals. When do I ideally want to land into a new position? How many jobs do I want to apply for each week? And look back at that, maybe every week, every other week, and say, okay, how am I doing on this? Keep in mind the time of year. There's going to be periods of the year where activity is really slow. Around major holidays, and how that may impact a job search, but giving yourself that self-reflection period and also a bit of grace to evaluate is important. But if you don't have a target and some goals, you'll flounder and you'll you'll find that you're waiting for things to come your way versus proactively going after them.
You mentioned setting a number for job applications every week. I'm curious. I'm guessing you would recommend quality over quantity. It's not just a numbers game, is it?
Absolutely. We always say don't angry apply. Don't just apply for every single thing out there. It's going to leave you feeling very dissatisfied. Have certainly have a target. And that may be for you. Maybe you're the kind of individual that says, I'm really interested in these 5 companies. So I'm going to focus on roles within these organizations. Or I'm the kind of individual that has a really unique, specific skill set. So I'm going to focus on job titles out there within this area and play around with job titles. What one company might call something is going to be different than another company calls something. So try to be broad in your search within looking at, the different ways you can describe a position, and also keep that in mind with your resume. Make sure some of those keywords are also embedded throughout so that you get picked up on different searches.
You also recommend that when considering revisiting job search goals, to get feedback, particularly if you're not getting second interviews or job offers when you reach that final stage. How what kind of feedback do you recommend, and how do you get it?
Gosh, it's tough. We know that. And I will say, if you are working with a recruiter, this can often be easier to get feedback because the recruiters also need feedback to meet those client needs. But trying to understand, am I articulating my achievements in a way that is understandable to the hiring manager? Was I speaking language from my former company, maybe using too many acronyms that don't apply to a different company? You know, just doing your best to capture even 1 or 2 tidbits from that hiring manager if they're willing to share it, because we know there's nothing more frustrating than saying, oh gosh, you were great, but we went with another individual, and there must be a reason that they went with the other individual. And trying to get that feedback is really critical. I think sometimes sending a LinkedIn follow-up message to a hiring manager can be a really effective way to do that. It's a less invasive than coming right into someone's inbox, I think.
You're a recruiter, and when you get requests for feedback from candidates, what are the kinds of questions you wish candidates would ask when asking for that feedback?
A good question can be, is there something I could have done differently to highlight my experience? Is there a different way that I should showcase my skill set around this particular function? Because some roles are so technical, some are more soft skills. Um, so I think just trying to capture a couple specific things. If we ask too broad of a question of someone, then that puts a lot of work on that individual to determine how to best give feedback. So maybe asking something more specific can be helpful for that person providing feedback.
Many people in the middle of a job search may think, I'm not going to get the senior position I want. I need to find a position now. And should I consider taking either a lateral move or even a step down? How do you recommend someone revisit that idea in considering their goals?
Practice positioning yourself for a different level of role, because we all know that what will happen is, someone may pass up on a candidate because they think they're overqualified or they will not be engaged. So really practice your response to that, or why you are interested in the company itself and what you can do to bring value to their organization. Also highlight where you will gain value. Maybe you've been in a very strategic role and you want to get back into some of the more tactical work. You want to make sure that your skills remain fresh and you have the value to bring to the organization, but you too will gain and be engaged, which makes for a great new hire.
Well, it's been a terrific conversation, Kristen. Now, tell us what's next for you.
Well, at Mulberry, I would say what's next for us is we are really strategically working on developing relationships and opportunities that will allow us to better support our C-level and executive level candidates in their job search. We know that that can sometimes be a more challenging approach sometimes, and how to go after those. And so working to expand our footprint of industries and different companies that we're working with to better support all levels of job seekers.
Well, listeners I know can learn more about you and Mulberry Talent Partners by visiting the Mulberry Talent Partners website. And you also invite listeners to connect with you on LinkedIn. We'll include links for both your company website and your LinkedIn page in the show notes. When people do reach out to you there on LinkedIn, Kristen, I hope they'll mention they heard you on Find Your Dream Job. Now, given all the great advice you've shared today, what's the one thing you want a listener to remember about when and how to revisit your job search goals?
Don't take your eye off the ball and listen to your gut. If your gut is telling you you should be getting more activity, then make the adjustment. Don't keep waiting and stay passive.
Next week, our guest will be Danielle Cobo. She's a career consultant who works with medical sales professionals. Her company's services include resume writing, LinkedIn optimization, and interview preparation. Many job seekers do nothing else when looking for work but apply for jobs. And if this is all you do, you're making your search longer and harder than it needs to be. Join us next Wednesday when Danielle Cobo and I talk about how to attract your next job without applying online. Until next time, thanks for letting us help you find your dream job. This show is produced by Max List. Susan Thornton Huff schedules our guests and writes our newsletter. Lisa Kislenberry Anderson manages our social media. Our sound engineer and editor is Matt Fiorillo. Dawn Moe creates our transcripts. And our music is by Freddie Trujillo. This is Mac Pritchard. See you next week.